does he do? He might go all the way. He gives it a ride. It's a chance. It'll be a goal. You beauty, buddy. Wants to roll through. He can. Cometh the moment. Cometh the champion. Yes! He made it! I don't believe it! I see it! But I don't believe it!
Welcome to the very first episode of the Swans Blog, Swans Cast. We've got a great show coming up for you tonight. We're going to review the first half of the season. We're going to talk about the players. We've got the Hawthorn match to cover. We've got to talk about our worst start since 1993. We've got some compilations of the best bits of the first half of the season coming up. We're going to talk to Stephen Treloar, who is the chief editor from Over the Line Sports. And we're also going to talk to Andrew Sertori, columnist for the Swans Blog and Swans enthusiast. So what's the Swans Cast, you might ask? Well, you know the way the blog is me, writing some things, you come along, you read those things, and everyone likes it. Well, the Swans Cast is me, talking instead. You can subscribe to the Swans Cast through iTunes, so that every time there's a new one, it automatically downloads to your music library. Otherwise, you can listen to it directly from the website or the Android app every time there's a new one. So, what are we going to do? Well, at the moment, everything is a little bit up in the air because it's new and these things take a while to find their feet, but I'll give you an idea of some of the things that are going to happen. One is there's going to be a blog chat, which is me phoning up another blogger or fan, talking about the Swans, the last game that was played, the next one coming up, and any other particular issues that might be affecting the team or football in general. Another thing we'll do is take on board your comments and emails and try to answer some of those questions. So you can always email swanscast at theswansblog.com during the week, as well as Facebook and Twitter at theswansblog using the hashtag swanscast. Hopefully I'll have time to go over some of those emails and comment or questions on social media in the show tonight. Another thing I want to do is maybe get some interviews with the players, if the club will allow that, or if any other players are willing to talk to me, or maybe some ex-players, or anyone involved in the club, or just anyone who might be interesting in terms of the Swans. Anyway, let's get into it. Well, the season started off with so much promise. After the results of last year, finishing minor premiers and runners-up in a grand final, 7 minutes left with just 1 point down, you can be forgiven for being pretty hopeful about the season. It's a first half that's kicked a proverbial bucket, a bucket that many of us have been sick into recently. All the optimism and hope that surrounded the team back in February, it's going to be a great season, the membership boon, everything, it's all kind of petered out, it's all gone. But the club, they didn't sit on their hands, they didn't do nothing, it's a well-run organisation. They went to the draft, they went for the young, quick, athletic players, they picked up Florent, they picked up Hayward, they also picked up some mature-bodied recruits, and they all got a game. But, before the first game of the season, everything's okay. And we're going to win the flag, or at least we're going to challenge. You remember, guys, you all felt like that. Of course you did. We all did. And now here we are, back in reality. There have been some good performances. Franklin becoming the 10th greatest goal kicker of all time. Reid snagging the 6 goals against the Dog. Man, how good was he in that game? And especially the rise of Jones, Lloyd, and Nick Newman.
Scramble, could go anyway, and it could go to the running man. Jones running, gunning, going. Kick was almost perfect for him. Over the top, great connection from the Swans. Cunningham's kicked another goal. Still time for a bit more. Franklin's got the run. He stays off because Reid had a better access. Here's Buddy, takes it and just gets the leverage on the left. Oh, what a kick from Franklin! He's had it again, Buddy Franklin.
He's not quick enough to get there.
No.
Oh, he's smart enough.
Yeah, still got the smarts. Saw off Vickers. Willis, he might have kicked another goal here. McVeigh. Got the aeroplanes going, I reckon.
Franklin just manhandles Gibson with a great tackle, and then Hewitt goes back to him. Franklin going hard, gets rid of Smith. Oh, what a game he's playing. Kick forward, protecting the ball. Good mark, Patley. Patley gets on his bike, goes to full forward. Florent, he's quick, Florent. He's very quick. He's quick enough. Handball, there in front.
What a way to finish off. Here he goes. He winds up Buddy. 8 or not? Yes! 8 is great for Buddy Franklin. The siren sounds on the Swans' first win.
really, since the start of the season, when we lost those games against the Dogs and Collingwood, it really seemed to dent our confidence. The players, they eventually recovered. They got it right for 3 weeks, but then they just chucked it all away. To say it's been a mixed bag would be doing it a kindness, I think. It's a mixed bag, but both the bags are different kinds of shit, like horse shit and dog shit. So there's your mixed bags. You just mix them together in the proportions that you prefer your bags to come in. 75% horse, 25% dog, 100% horse, whichever way you like it. Just mix it together. The run we had after round 6, where we've dragged ourselves out of the mire, having mixed our bags of shit, all it does for me is tell me that this team is much more capable than it's shown. It only adds to the frustration, I think. That only makes you go, well, where the fuck was that for the first 6 games? Where were the players? Where was the commitment and all? It's hard to look at the start of the season as anything other than a bit of a mess. Like the run at the start of the season, those 6 games equal our worst start since 1993. Not since the old dog days have the Swans been so poor. Well, we kicked it off with a lot of promise. So much fanfare against Port Adelaide. Optimism was palpable. The players, on the other hand, well, they were caught drinking their own bathwater. They thought, we'd turn up, we'd conquer, we'd go home. Yeah, great. All the while the fans sat around asking, what the hell was that? The performance the following week against the Dogs was a lot better. The pressure was up and the tackles were there. And, they even hit the front for a few minutes. We had Franklin just carrying the team on his shoulders, but even then it just wasn't enough. Franklin and Reid combined for 10 of the team's goals. Where was the spread? But it was just another case. Franklin dragging the team along with him. It was a great performance. An amazing 15-minute burst, but either side of that, you just got to wonder what was going on. Even with Tipper taking his obligatory time out, injuring his ankle against the Dogs, they ran over us in the end. But, could be worse. We're looking better. And then, well, there was the Pies game. The start was, did the players even show up? It seemed like the other guys, the blondes and black and white stripes, ran a 30-minute training drill with a few turnovers. They had the ball on a string, basically. But, credit to the Swans, who turned up at last and made a contest of the game. Franklin was kept goalless and the Swans lost by a point. It was a soul-crushing defeat that left the players bereft of confidence. It was obvious, to all there to see that the next game against the Eagles, as winnable as they get, was proof just how much the confidence had been sapped from the squad. Just how hard it was for them to do the basics right. It doesn't help when the AFL makes rules and interpretation changes during the week, or during the game for that matter. But they did, and the Swans didn't pick it up. That was really point in case against the Pies that first quarter. But afterwards, you pick ourselves up, you look forward to the next game. We hit the AFL darlings head on, and we started with a bang. We kicked the first 4 goals. We gave ourselves a head start. But then, GWS, they steamrolled us with a massive 64-point turnaround. Even 4 goals to nil, they still led at quarter time by 10 points. It was just another terrible, ghastly, soul-crushing loss, and a pretty disastrous performance to go with it. And then there was the Carlton game. Well, there isn't much good I can say about it. It was dire from the start, dire throughout, and soul-crushing at the end. It's not often you watch the Swans throw away a first-half lead. Having led at quarter time, they did. And there was nothing the Swans players did to stem it. Worst of all was the lack of camaraderie, the lack of fight and team spirit. You can play like shit. You could be an ordinary player, but you've got to go and play for the team. You've got to give it your all. Watching the vice-captain stand by and do nothing while Mills is getting slammed by the Carlton players. A kid, he's 19 years old, a 30-game veteran. He's getting targeted. It's disappointing. Even more shocking was Kennedy and the media saying, I didn't even know this was happening. And you have even Heaney come out and say it was, the quietest game that he's played in a long time. There was no talk on the field. There was nothing. It was really reflective of the fact that the players they didn't look like they wanted to be out there. It was bloody obvious. They played like they wanted to piss off back home on the plane as fast as possible. It was, as far as performances go, that Carlton game was disgraceful to say the least. And despite all the negativity and the really poor results, it was really good to see the boys finally come together again for the Lions game. We finally got on the board, and off the bottom of the ladder against the Lions. Just like us, they've been a bit shit this season. No mixed bag about it, just 90% horse and 10% dog. The game was well and truly out of reach at quarter time. So as we as fans could sit back, relax, drink a few beers and joke about how bad the Lions were, because, they were really bad. your failure to distract us, to stop reminding us of just, how bad we'd actually been, because we'd been dire, as bad as it gets. You don't equal your worst ever start in AFL, VFL history, playing fantastic football. Franklin had himself a big day out, he kicked a few blinders, finishing at 8 goals. His lean spell was over and the Swans were back in business. The next 2 games, they papered over the cracks, if you will, more like miles wide chasm in our game plan. We thumped the Roos, a bit of a rabble at the time, and we torched the Saints, who couldn't deal with the pressure. We were sitting 3-6, finals chances on the line, but still a hope with a percentage over 100. I can't remember the last time a team sat 3-6 with 100%. Chances were there. And then the Hawks happened. The promise, the hope, all of it was gone. The bags of shit were there to be mixed again. Long after we thought they could be thrown out, dumped on the garden and used as fertiliser. We won't play like that again, declared the players. We'll do better, said the players. You guys remember? Sure, you all do. Hanbury, Parker, Kennedy, all coming out. You're saying it's going to change. It's going to get better. Yeah, sure it did. The first half cost us the game. Even with the 2 concussions, the lack of pressure, intensity, and just the desire to win the contest, beat their opponent, play accountable, or just man up. That cost the game. Even as things improved in the second quarter, with Franklin carrying the team on his shoulders, Herculean effort, the way he played. The Hawks hit back, as they always do. It was predictable. They always do it, every game. This is a team that were thrashed by St Kilda in Tasmania by almost 100 points, mind you. Thrashed. Just think about that for a second. Using good old footy logic, St Kilda thrashed them, we thrashed St Kilda, and therefore we're better than them, right? Yeah, well, someone forgot to tell the players that they were in it to win it. They'll turn up, they always do, against the Swans, and they did. What was going through the coach's head that game, you've got to wonder. The Hawks had so much uncontested ball off the halfback flank. They had it on a string and the Swans were just letting them have it. They did the same against the Saints, and we're talking about the Saints here, and they're not an elite ball-using team, but the Hawks are. You give them all the space in the world, they're going to kill you. They played grand finals. They played 4 grand finals in a row, for crying out loud. You don't do that by playing like mugs. We managed to get back in the game. We worked our bollocks off. Big third quarter. Franklin kicking his 5th goal, joining the all-time top 10 goal-kicking list, dragging the team on his shoulders. But it still just never looked like we could hold on to the win and win it. 10 minutes left, 7 points up. Unless someone could seal the deal, it just felt like it was going to slip. And lo and behold, what happens? Hawks get the last 2 goals of the game. For all the pressure and the time spent now forward half in that last quarter, all the chances and opportunities that we had to score, we only managed 1 point in the last 10 minutes. For all the criticism that Mills comes under, he scored that 1 point. What about everyone else? What about the fact that Franklin spent almost half of that time, if not more, on the bench, and our forward line was Florent, Hayward, and Papley? You can't score with a forward line like that. It's madness. Just one solitary point. The Hawks scored 2 goals. 2 arsey goals, but they got them anyway. But anyway, look, enough of that. It's done and done. Let's move on. Here with me I have Stephen Treloar, the chief editor from Over the Line Sports, and Andrew Sertori, columnist with the Swans Blog and Swans enthusiast. Thank you for joining me, guys, on the Roundtable. All right, guys, first question. Who have you been most impressed with this season? Andrew, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think the most obvious one is Jake Lloyd for me, just in terms of what he's been able to do this year and bring to the table. I mean, I know his disposal needs a bit of work. I don't think he'll ever be an elite player, but, you're seeing a man who's averaging basically 30 disposals a game. The game on the weekend or on Friday night sort of illustrated the point of how vital he's become because he's getting close to 30 possessions a game. And then when he's not there, we sure missed him. What he does do, apart from accumulate the ball, he does set up opportunities. He can kick it a little bit up and under at times, but there's not a player who works harder in the team, arguably. And I wish some of the more highly touted Swans would follow his lead in terms of their output. And even in the bad losses this year, I think he stood up as a player in terms of what he's given us, and that's been pleasing, considering last year he was good, solid, but he probably had arguably an average grand final. I think he got 20 odd disposals, but he wasn't really a factor on the day. So he's one who, in a bad year, has come on in leaps and bounds, in my opinion.
And Stephen?
Yeah, I agree there, and I think with Jakey, there aren't him. Like, you really just can't question his work rate and the effort he puts in week after week, and it's great to see, at least one of our players really take that. One of our established players really take that step up in 2017. One player who has kind of impressed me in taking more midfield responsibility, and that's George Hewitt. In terms of getting in the ball and getting the clearance numbers up, he's been doing well on that front. And it's also great to see Nick Newman finally getting on the park. But I think my pick has to go Zach Jones. It might just be because he's out of contract, but suddenly everyone's just taking notice of him, and he's doing those things which really kind of make an impact on a game. He's busting through packs, he's giving a bit of aggression, which might make the Swans fans a bit nervous, but I think it's actually kind of good to see a bit of backbone and a bit of grunt and aggression amongst some of the players, and especially, I just think back to that grand final against Hawthorn where we just kind of lay down in front of them sort of thing. And yeah, we've kind of been missing that grunt ever since then, really. So it's good to see him taking the mantle on that front.
Yeah, it's a really good point you raise, especially that 2014 grand final. It all really stemmed from that first really big sort of contest with Hanbury, and you could see the players, they just wilted. And you kind of look at someone like Jones, he's got that fire in him. He really brings that aggression to the side. I definitely agree with Lloyd. We missed him something shocking on Friday night, and you could just see how important he was to just the ball movement from the halfback flank. And you could also look at other players such as Nick Newman. He has been superb since he's come back into the side. He's been dropped a couple of times, but he's made his mark. And yeah, well, to be honest, the list of impressive is a lot less than unimpressive, unfortunately, which leads us into the next question. So, who have you been most disappointed by? Stephen, you want to kick us off?
Oh, look, where do I start? Obviously, there's a few candidates. I kind of look back at last year, and we kind of had those big three mids. So we had Kennedy, Hanbury, and Parker. And in 2017, the consistency has really dropped, especially Parker, in my mind. He has had less disposals, just less impact all around. And if we get, we've had a few wins coming up, so we're not at the 0-6 stage anymore, which is great. But if we can get Parker back to his best, because he was runner up in the Brownlow last year, he's got the kind of game-changing ability. If we can get him back to that sort of level, then, the wins will start coming much more easily, I reckon. And I'd also like to make one quick point. Alia, he's got a unique skill set for such a big guy, but his one-on-one defensive work, he just gets caught out time after time, and he needs to work on that before he kind of cements his spot in the best 22, I reckon.
And that's probably why he's sitting in the reserves at the moment, because his athleticism is almost second to none. The way he can attack the ball, read the ball, and just punch it through the defence is outstanding. Do you think that is the reason why he's in the reserves, to work on that one-on-one defending?
Well, I think so. Last week in the reserves, he was actually moved forward and kicked 3 goals. So maybe that was when Sam Reid was injured. They had a few concerns around him. But yeah, I guess his ideal role in a kind of perfect world would be as that kind of floating Josh Gibson-esque third tall, where he can just use his short burst pace to get a punch into the contest and then pick up the ball and just dash through. Because when he does that and he makes the highlight reels and he looks brilliant, but if someone's kicking a ball inside 50 in his one-on-one, he's not going to win. You have to be concerned, I think.
And I think North Melbourne they really exposed him in both the games that we played against him last year, especially in Tasmania. They had him lost at sea. You could see at halftime he didn't even know where to stand on the ground. It's like you're watching him, you're just like, mate, what are you doing? He's sort of standing in the middle of nowhere, just sort of turning around, shaking his head, like, what am I doing?
And to be fair, he's still game. Like, he hasn't had the kind of years of experience in the juniors, like playing since he was 8 years old. But yeah, I mean, hopefully that's something he can pick up on.
Oh, absolutely. And what do you think, Andrew?
Well, on the Aaliyah point, I think it's quite disappointing, yes, because, I mean, preliminary final last year he went down, and I think as fans we sort of pointed to him as one of the differences between beating the Dogs and not. He was seen as, okay, this is going to be a big year for Aaliyah. So from that point of view, disappointing. I think he's probably been harshly dealt with in some ways as well. I mean, he's only had the 3 games. He's lacked some fitness in parts as well. I don't think we can forget that. But certainly in terms of what the expectation was going into the year, he's one of many who have been disappointing. I think there's a couple we touched on. I think Parker, clearly from the heights that he got to and where he is now. I know he is still racking up the numbers, but for me the big difference is one of his... People talk about Parker v Mitchell now. Mitchell's gone, and Parker is seen as this great contested marker, can kick a goal. Well, he's kicked 5 goals this year in 10 games. That's not Luke Parker that we know and love. I think, I know I get a lot of flack for picking on him, but Sam Reid, 2 great games to start with, but Longmire's moved him around and around the park, and there's no consistency to his game between his best and his worst still. Kieran Jack started the year pretty poorly, and, I mean, subsequently turns out he's injured, but still was disappointing. Grundy and Smith at times have looked like they've fallen off a cliff. The obvious player to me, and most disappointing in terms of what he's paid, and I know he's become the whipping boy, but it's got to be Kurt Tippett. I mean, he's our second highest paid player, and I know there's some who dispute that, but you don't sign contracts with extension clauses that give you a 50% pay cut. That's just stupid. So let's not pretend he's not on big money. And what he gives us, I would argue, Sinclair's gone past him, and we know what Sinclair's capable of. So Tippett's just, he looks like he doesn't care half the time to me, and I think that's frustrating when you hear some of those, probably rumours, but of what happened with Tippett post-grand final and so on. But if I had to nominate one disappointing person out of all that, for me it's actually not on the field, it's in the coach's box, and that's John Longmire and his inability to change tactics and to deal effectively with the talent that he does have. I think he gets the praise for 2012, he gets the praise for when we do well, but to me, when this side doesn't perform and doesn't adjust like Collingwood, he got out-coached by Buckley, for God's sake. He got out-coached by Clarkson with the Box Hill side, playing chip footy, uncontested possession, grand footy, and he makes no adjustments. Now, either the players don't listen to what he wants or he has a bad game plan. So to me, that's been the most disappointing part, that I think we have more talent than 3 and 7. Whether we're one of the top sides or not, that's arguable, but to me, that makes John Longmire the most disappointing part of the Swan season.
Well, it's a fair point you raised, to be honest, because one of the things that he has tried to implement is trying to go to a more zonal defence setup, so that they're trying to limit how much ball can be moved efficiently through the midfield and also down the wings. And you can definitely see the result of the hard work against St Kilda. However, you got to look at the 8 games before the St Kilda game. You only got 2 wins, one against, actually both of them were against bottom 4 teams at the time. So yes, you really can't look at it and go, wow, it's working. Because, let's face it, it's not working. It's garbage.
Well, they were poor against Brisbane, let's be honest. Like, Brisbane just aren't good enough to beat Sydney, and we were at home and we got on a roll, but the defence still looked quite poor to me. Against North Melbourne, I thought we had the game in control, and he still moved Sam Reid back for some reason really early, even though he was on top of his defender. He had 3 goals to half-time, and then he's back in defence. And
yeah,
St Kilda...
Well, the only player they had was Sideshow Bob. That's all they had.
Exactly. And when the ball does get into our defence, if a team wins the inside 50s against Sydney, I think they will win the game at the moment, because our defence doesn't seem to be able to cope. And Longmire seems to be a naturally defensive coach, but what I find frustrating is the stubbornness on game day, that at halftime Hawthorn, 159, I think it was, uncontested possessions to about 98, 99. That's a pretty low, and you can see it unfolding on the ground. And even when they kicked the winning goal, it was uncontested chip passes to get it to Roughhead. uncontested. Now, you can point to the rotations being down if you like, but it's the same thing that happened against Collingwood, same thing against Carlton. Teams have figured him out. And where's the plan B? I don't see it, other than moving Reid back. And that just reminds me of Worsfold with Adam Hunter back in the day. It seems to be his go-to move. And it's frustrating as a fan, I think, because this list is capable of more.
Yeah, looking at that Hawthorn game, I had a look at the possession heat maps for Hawthorn at the end of the game, and it just there's this massive kind of line of red, which went from their defensive 50 and straight up the wings. There was nothing in the centre corridor. You could kind of surely the coaching panel would have seen what was happening there, and it just didn't really change much. I mean, there's lots of talk in the post-match interviews and stuff about putting lots of effort in, and I think we caught up with them and were ahead in that last quarter because of effort and all that sort of thing. But I think just tactically, yeah, we were just outplayed and outclassed on that point.
Yeah, look, it's something that's sort of happened time and time again. Against St Kilda, there was an obvious ploy to try and push the play across the back flank, and St Kilda, they don't really have the skills to be able to match Hawthorn in that sort of way. They don't really have the game plan or the game style to do it. They're very much run and gun, get it in tight and close and explode with handballs. And, the commentators make a lot of noise about the fact that they shred, heavy handballing teams to pieces. And, the Swans, they're pretty heavy handballing. And the thing is, the Swans won by 8 goals. That says a bit. Just before we jump on to the next subject, some of the other players, that we could look at, Dan Hanbury, he was pretty bad for the first month of football. You could also chuck in Jarrett McVeigh into the discussion because he's only played 4 and a bit quarters. Jordan Foote, he wasn't particularly good at the start of the season. Fundamentally, he's limited. He's not really an AFL level player. Kurt Tippett, again, I've got to agree with Andrew here, and I know he's a bit of a lightning rod for fan anger and a lot of discussion in AFL at the moment. But the thing you have to remember is last year, up to round 8, round 9, when he did his knee or his hamstring against GWS, he was leading the best and fairest. He was superb. He was basically on all Australian form. Since then, he's played not quite 10 games, maybe just a little bit under. Since he came back, he has been awful. He was awful in the finals. He's been awful this season. He's had his obligatory injury. You're just not getting any kind of value out of him whatsoever. It's just, some things have been really disappointing. And I definitely agree with Andrew that the coaching has not helped. Like, you got Sam Reid, he kicked 10, 12 goals in the first 2-3 games of the year. And since then, he's played more minutes in the ruck and defence. Like, what the hell? Play the guy as a forward. What were we doing on Friday? We played him in defence from the 15th minute of the first quarter.
There was one patch in the game where I think Tippett marked it, or one of them, Reid, I think, and then looking around, Reid and Buddy were nearby, and that was outside the forward 50, and they kicked forward, and I think it was Papley and maybe Towers in the forward line. Like, well, where's the structure there? Like, you've got 3 tall marking forwards, and we've highlighted some of Tippett's deficiencies in his performance, but what have you. But surely one of them needs to be in the forward 50 on the SCG when you've got control of the ball. It's just so it's either players don't listen or Horse can't coach a team. To me, I don't see the structure.
Well, if you look at the last 10 minutes, right, and I was fortunate because I was at the ground, you could see how they were setting up. They had Papley as the forward. Rowan was in defence. Reid was off the ground, but he was playing defence. Franklin was off the ground. Parker was in midfield. Kennedy was in midfield. Heaney was in midfield. It was literally Florent, Hayward, and Papley. Those were the only forwards we had. And you can't win a game.
That's terrifying.
It was just like, come on, taking the piss almost.
And I know Mills copped a bit for missing that goal that he probably should have kicked, but then it was like the siren went for Sydney for that last goal for Hawthorn. If you watch the footage behind the goals, you literally see Roughhead walk unattended from just forward of centre wing up to the half-forward line, take the mark, kick a goal. There was no one on him, and they didn't man up. There's 30 seconds to go. Yes, you're down 2 rotations, but you're telling me that elite athletes can't man up for 30 seconds and run just that fraction bit more. There's just something amiss there to me.
I agree. And look, that leads us into the next question, what do the Swans need to do to turn the season around?
Where to begin? Part of that, I think, has to be it's the mental side of the game, and whether that's to do with structure or the players are exhausted, but they just have to find that kind of second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth wind and know how to get it done. Because with the Swans, and this has been the case for a few years now, when it's a close game and there's 10 seconds left, I mean, thankfully we're not as bad as Richmond in that case, but you're not confident that the Swans can really kind of hold through and pull off a win. We have to kind of really dominate a team all the way through for it to happen, and thankfully we've been able to do that the past few years, but part of that mental game and to really kind of hold through till the final siren would give us a huge help. Another thing I think would give a lot of help is to really sort out our best 22, and particularly in defence. Looking at four guys, so you've got Elia, Mark, Laidler, and Melican, and chuck in Newman in there as well as a different type of player, but throwing him in there as well. You've got all these players, and Talia as well. Which ones are definite best 22, and which ones do you play in reserves, and which ones are depth players? Because I'm honestly not sure what the case is in that point.
Out of that list, the ones you've listed, especially Melican, Marsh, Laidler, and Talia, who do you see as the long-term future for our sort of centre-half or full-back defensive players?
Well, not Talia, because he doesn't seem to be able to get a game even in the greatest depths of despair at Sydney. So I presume his papers have been stamped. I think you have to build the team around guys like Melican and Alir and get what you can out of what's left of Heath Grundy in defence. But yeah, I'd like to see Talia play. I don't know about you guys. He's on the list. We may as well see what he can do. I don't watch the reserves enough to know. Just my luck, he's probably injured or something. That's how little I watch the reserves. But
he had 29 disposals last week. He was very good.
So what? So to me, that's just stubbornness on the selection committee's part, which we've seen in the past with, the man who's at Hawthorn now. We've seen him rack up numbers and not be picked. Is Talia in the same boat? He's just not part of that Bloods culture or something. I don't know, but our defence leaks like a sieve. So give him a go, for God's sake. Play Alir in the seniors. I don't care if he runs off. Sometimes let's develop him. I think Melican looks solid, looks like a player. I know he's raw, but I like what he brings to the table. So there's a bit to work with there.
We need that second, because Grundy's doing it all himself at the moment when it comes to the key defence, and he just needs someone there to help him out, because, this year in particular, he's just falling apart a bit.
Well, we've missed Rampy big time, and I know he's back now, but that whoever put that fence there should be fired from the SCG staff, because that's been a big part of our decline this year, Rampy being out and not being available. Though he was back on, obviously, for the debacle on Friday, but Heath Grundy hasn't looked like Heath Grundy either, let's be honest, and what he has left in the tank, I don't know.
That's a fair point you raise. And you could see the signs early in the season, but he just wasn't quite right. And, I know we talked about this, especially on the Big Footy forums, that the players, they didn't really look that fit, that there was too many players playing with injury, but also the fact that there was just too many inexperienced players playing in positions that they just weren't either very good at or just didn't really have much experience with. You can look at players like Alia, who came back, he wasn't fit. You can look at also Kieran Jack, he wasn't fit. And then you can also throw in Marsh, Laidler, who, at various times they looked okay, but, Laidler, he's not really there anymore. He's just too slow. And frequently I've raised the argument, should Melican really be learning his trade in the AFL? It's pretty much the hardest level you can possibly learn it in. Is it really appropriate for him to be doing it now in the AFL? What do you guys think?
I like Melican as a player. I thought he looked good on the weekend. you can't read the stat sheet for a key defensive type, but I mean, what did he fail to do in his games that he's played that you think someone else alternatively could do, I guess would be the question. And I know he's made a few mistakes. He looked a bit nervous later in the game against Hawthorn when it was tight. I would concede that, but I would argue he actually had a fair bit more poise than some of the more senior players in the back line, to be honest. So I think the NEAFL competition is not going to give him the development he needs anyway. So I'm comfortable with him being inside at the moment. I think who are the alternates? If you're not going to play Talia, it's either bring Aaliyah back, and then we're arguably doing the same thing, developing him in the seniors. So then it comes down to attitude, I think. Marsh, who's arguably undersized for a key defender, or go back to Laidler, and that's, to me, seems to be, going back to an old veteran. So what's the point? So I think by default, it's almost play Melican in the seniors, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, look, and he's been playing in the reserves for a few years now, and he's getting his shot now, and I do think he will benefit from taking a week off from senior football, because the pressure, and the difference between senior footy and reserves is clearly for everyone to see, really. But I mean, I guess that's what they're doing with Nick Newman as well, rotating him in and out just till he finds his feet, sort of thing. But it seems we have all these kind of half-decent defenders developing. So Melican, Aaliyah, Marsh, Jack Maybaum, who was a under-18s All-Australian fullback last year in his draft year. So he's got a bit of quality behind him, a bit of promise. But we need someone who can really fill in now and who can, you can trust to do a job for the full 4 quarters. And I don't think we have that at the moment, and that's whether we go to trade someone in next year, at the end of the year. That's probably the way I'd go, just for a short-term bit while these guys develop. But, yeah, we need something to fix that up.
And that's probably the role that Laidler has played on and off. And you would have thought early last year we recruited Talia to be that guy, ready-made sort of. Well, not ready-made. I mean, he hadn't established himself fully, but on the surface, he seemed ready to step into the seniors like he did round 1 before he got injured last year. So maybe he is the answer, but I think there's more to meet the eye going on with Talia, clearly, because, as you guys have said, he's got form in the reserve, so why hasn't he played? And, I mean, we've also got Dawson, who looked all right on debut, but I wouldn't be rushing him into the side. You're just perpetuating the problem down there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all very good points. How we actually deal with the defence in the future is going to be very interesting, especially as Grundy sort of passes the baton on. And, Smith, he's not exactly young anymore, so we need to look for that next player. And, if Newman's that next player or Jones, he goes back, that's something that we really need to sort of take grasp of and really run with it. Now, for the next one, can the Swans turn their season around?
Well, the point I was going to make in terms of how we improve, and that leads on to that, was, if you look at our wins this year, we scored 135, 118, 120, and we won the game. Every single loss, we haven't passed 90. The closest we got was 87 or something, I think, against the Dogs. So we don't score enough at all. If you look at the team, Buddy's got his 32 goals and kicking 3 a game. He's doing his job in terms of pure score output. The next best is Sam Reid on 15. Now, that's not too bad, but he kicked 11 of them in 2 weeks. So basically, since then, he's kicked 4 goals in 8 rounds, and he's your second best tall forward. Tippett's got what? Has he got a goal? He's got 3 goals, I think.
3 in 5 games, yeah.
Haywood's got 11. So we're not scoring. We don't generate scores. When we do, we win. When we get the ball forward, we win. So where does that come from? I guess that's just looking at the stats. How do we improve? We need to dominate the midfield and the ruck and protect that defence. Our defence is where we were once highly vaunted, is weak. So we need to control the inside 50s, limit the contested possession. Can we turn the season around? Look, we also need to start winning at our home ground. We've been pathetic at the SCG, and you would have thought if we're going to win a couple of games, they'd be home games. But can we turn it around? Look, I think if you look at the draw, you'd have to say, well, where are the wins coming from? I can't see us beating the Dogs. Richmond always trouble us. I think you can make a strong case. Essendon, with their pace, could get us at the SCG. So that if you lose those 3 seasons over anyway, so can they turn it around? Technically, yes, but would you bet on it? No, I wouldn't. Just purely looking at who we have left to play. I mean, we play the Giants again. We've got to play Adelaide in Adelaide, Geelong in Geelong, Hawthorn in Melbourne. I don't know. I think we've won 3. You'd have to win at least 7 or 8 more. I don't see where those wins come from. So my short answer is no. We're not going to turn it around. We've left it too late. We've dropped too many Hawthorn and Carlton games. Collingwood too costly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It'll take a miracle at this rate, or unless we go back to South Melbourne and move our home stadium to Etihad. But I mean, honestly, this year I've been kind of looking at who the top draftees are at, because we're probably going to have a pretty good draft pick this year, guys, I'm afraid.
I've actually got a bad feeling we'll finish middle of the road and get like pick 7 or something.
Oh, don't. I mean, not that I ever advocate, but yeah. I mean,
I wonder if
really
Despremi was back on the market if we take him.
Yeah, I was just thinking we were really relying on that Hawthorn game to, keep that momentum going. We were getting a few wins, and now it seems we're just kind of even further back than we were before. I guess this week is probably the best possible time we could have a bye. Next match we'll have, I think we're having McVeigh, Kieran Jack and Sam Naismith available for selection. So the first 2, McVeigh and Jack, they'll provide just such needed leadership and stability, even though they aren't necessarily in the best individual form. That's something that can't be measured by stats, but just makes such a difference. And Naismith will... the best thing about Naismith is it'll allow Tippett to stay forward more often. And for me, Kurt Tippett needs to stay forward. Playing him as a first ruck is just kind of asking for trouble, really. He'll get beaten most times. So there's some kind of short-term gain there, but, I mean, look, not looking too confident at this stage.
That's all very good. And, that's a really interesting point you raise about Tippett, especially the fact that he has to play as that stay-at-home forward. It's a bit of, it's come full circle, really, because we recruited him to play as a power forward, and we kind of shot ourselves in the foot with Franklin. But let's face it, I mean, you're never going to pass up, once-in-a-lifetime kind of player. And then we played him in a role he wasn't very good at, then he became good at it, and now he's a bit shit again, so... Yeah, I agree.
I mean, if you do look at Tippett for a second, I mean, that 2013 year as a key forward, he did his job, I would argue.
He averaged 3 goals a game.
He was superb when he came on. That first game, he was picking them up like it was a rock and water, man. He was just gloving them.
But I think him and Buddy at first worked together well that 2014 season. Tippett got a bit injured, but Tippett was kicked 34 goals in limited games. It did work before. Tippett had to go take over the ruck. It has worked. I think later on we'll talk about the psychological impact of the grand final loss, but I would argue that maybe it's taken its toll on Tippett more than anyone in terms of he looks done almost. He doesn't, because I'm not going to, we pile shit on the guy, but he has had some good moments as a Swan. Let's not pretend he hasn't. He hasn't performed when it mattered due to injuries or lack of form at the time, but he's shown he can play football. It's just, I don't know what it is. He just doesn't outbody anyone. He used to look great in the wet, for instance. He doesn't look like that anymore. It's just, is it fitness? Is it mental? Can him, Reid and Franklin coexist? Have all 3 ever been in form at the same time? I think if you look at the stats, it's arguably no. We've never had all 3 firing together, so maybe that doesn't work. But Naismith is an obvious person to come in, but as much as we also laugh at Sinclair, he's actually done all right considering his skill level. So does he deserve to be dropped? That's another thing to consider.
Well, very good point. It's going to be one of those, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, because you're going to have to carry one or the other. And at the moment, on merit and definitely on performance, Sinclair's earned his spot. You can't really drop him. He's not great. He does his role. He does it well. I think the most galling thing is the fact that he's actually out-rucking him. He's smaller. He can't jump high. He just out-rucks him. And that, for me, is the most disappointing thing. All right, so let's move it on into the last question. In 25 words or less, How do you rate the first half of the season? Stephen, you want to kick it off?
I'll give the Swans just scraping a D grade. There are some positives to be found, especially with some of our young guys, but lack of consistency, mental application, a couple of injuries, and suddenly it looks like we're in the running for a draft pick.
Andrew?
I'll give it an F. It's fail. Going into the season, deservedly one of the favourites, in my opinion, and that this list's underperforming and deserves all the slack it's copying.
Fair enough. All right. Now we're going to get into our questions. All right. Stephen, first question. This is from Penny Jackson on Facebook. Is the Swans' downfall from injuries alone?
Oh, good question, Penny. I don't think it's injuries alone, but they've certainly played a factor. I mean, in the past 2 years, we've played the most debutants than any other club, I'm pretty sure. And those youngsters have had a lot to do this year. We've come into 2017 with the fourth youngest list in the comp. At one round, we had more guys playing less than 10 games than Brisbane had. So, I'm not going to beat around the bush. We're a young side. Last year, the beginning of 2016, we had lost, who was it, Goods, Bird, Pike, Jeddah and Shaw. That's about 1,000 games experience. So we were rebuilding last year and we managed to get a grand final. So it is disappointing that we can't get back to those heights in 2017. But I think also that mental side of it, plus lack of consistency, also contributes to that downfall.
Awesome. And Andrew?
The short answer for me be yes, but no at the same time. I think we've got depth issues in terms of we've got some really nice youngsters, some top-end stars, and when we get the injuries, we don't have the list to cover those injuries. So in that sense, yes, they have contributed to the downfall, but is it injuries alone? No, that's not. So, that's my answer.
All right, awesome. On to the next one. This is from Liam Grierson, again from Facebook. Who should the Swans trade for and who should they get rid of?
Yeah, well, I think the easier question is who should we bring in? Well, it's quite easy to answer both, I guess. There are plenty of candidates who fit of anger would say, get out of our club. But look, in terms of filling needs, I think a good key defender to help and eventually replace Grundy would help heaps. As we said earlier, we thought that might be Talia, but that's not happening for some reason. But bringing in that kind of second lockdown defender would really free up guys like Alir and Rampy to be more attacking and to give us that real potency coming out of defence. And look, I don't know why we haven't pounced on Eric McKenzie from West Coast yet. I think he'd be a great fit in terms of our structure, and he and Grundy would shut down quite well together.
I think that I agree we need to trade for a key defender. Without going into all caps, pace and realistic trades, I'll just leave it at key defender, but also a midfielder who can hit a target. And who should we get rid of? Well, Kurt Tippett, if someone will take him. But realistic trade chip, if it was for the right deal, this is only for the right deal, I think Luke Parker would have currency to get you something good. Arguably, Heaney Mills develop. You've got Kennedy, Hanbury. Get rid of someone who could fit in and be a really great player on another side if he got you a star defender or a star midfielder who can use the ball by foot at an elite level. So not saying get rid of him for nothing, but if you had to give something to get something, he'd be expendable to a point. That's just spitballing it out there. But we do need to start hitting some bloody targets. So that's what I'd be looking for.
Yeah, true. Actually, just on a bit of a sidebar sort of thing, but I had a look in an article a couple of days ago, and it was talking about North Melbourne's rucks. So they've got Todd Goldstein, All-Australian, star ruckman, and Braden Preuss, who's debuted this year, absolutely been killing it. And Brad Scott himself has said that he's way too good to be playing VFL, but he can't fit them both in the same team. So if you could get one of those two who would be able to play that kind of main ruck role and who would kind of be an upgrade on even guys like Naismith and get them for a decent price, would you go for one of those two?
I think you'd have to go for Goldstein. You're not going to get him. You're going to have to give something big away. But if you're going to go for one, it'd have to be Goldstein. Because then you could just move Tippett back to full forward. You could have Naismith and Goldstein in the ruck, and they would absolutely kill it. That'd be one of the best combinations. Otherwise, I think more realistically, if Bruce is available, absolutely 100% go for him. But then you have to look at the role of Naismith, you have to look at Sinclair, and you have to look at Tippett. And realistically, one of them's got to go. And that one is most likely going to be Tippett.
But no one will take him.
Tippett? No, people will take him. He'll just have to go at a discounted rate. Like, people will take him for 500,000-600,000. I've got no doubt about that, especially if you can still be convincing as a power forward or even as a second ruck.
The one thing to variable will be if we re-sign Sam Reid or if he goes elsewhere, because that would change Tippett's role arguably in the team if it was just Tippett and Franklin. So that does open the door for another ruck potentially.
I don't think you can afford to have Naismith and Bruce in the same team because they're too like each other. They're both really big, slow lumbering ruckmen. They're tap ruckmen. They're massive units. They've got mediocre skills. I've seen Naismith hit some nice chiselers, but they're not the kind of players you're going to see run up and down the ground like Goldstein does. Even Mumford does. Sinclair does at times when he's fit enough to do it. I just wanted to touch on before what you said about Parker as well. I agree that if the right trade was there for Parker, it should be worth considering. But I'm saying the right trade is someone like Dustin Martin. He is, if you're looking at player for player, and if we've got salary cap space and you're willing to throw up Luke Parker, you get Dustin Martin. That is the only player I'd ever consider. What do you guys think? I
think Richmond would be wanting something with Parker as well to make that deal.
I can have Tippett, man. Give him Tippett.
Well, yeah, they only just got rid of Vickery, so I don't know that they'd want Tippett. But yeah, look, you'd want someone good. I haven't put much thought into it. I was just thinking of who's a tradable commodity that would have some value, and I don't see it ever happening. He's the vice captain of the club. He's not going anywhere. He's signed up. So it was just pie in the sky stuff, and I don't think we're landing a big fish. So I'm sorry to Tedeschi on the Big Footy Swans board. We're not getting Fife, and we're not getting Martin or whoever else you think we're getting.
Not unless we have some sort of exodus, which is just going to kill the club.
My priority is sign Jones and sign Reid at the right price.
Yeah, whatever that price is.
Rather than bringing on it, yeah.
Oh, look, the problem with Reid is he's going to be 650 minimum. Is he worth it? No. I don't think he's ever going to be worth that money. He's got the ability. He can't put it together long enough. That's his problem.
With the right team and the right coach, though.
Yeah. All right. Next question. This comes from Daniel Cumming on Facebook. Should Sydney consider the option of playing down back and dropping the second ruck for either Talia or Aaliyah to do the forward second ruck role?
Yeah, so as I was saying before, Aaliyah last week in the reserves, Aaliyah was actually moved forward and did play that kind of forward ruck role, and he kicked 3 goals, and this was against an absolutely shocking Gold Coast reserve side. We walloped them by over 100 points in some of the worst football I've ever seen. I was only following on the tweets, but from all reports, Gold Coast, which is absolutely shocking. So that's kind of promising to see that, A, he has another string to his bow, and kind of maybe in a break glass in case of emergency, we could play him as that kind of second ruck or even as a forward. I think with the list we've got, though, and when you have guys like, Sinclair, you have Sinclair, Tippett, Naismith, just kind of, and also Darcy Cameron, who we shouldn't forget, who also plays that ruck forward sort of role. I don't think it's worth kind of using a Talia or a Lear doing that. I think, and we have our problems in defence as well. So I don't know, maybe I don't know.
My answer is no, and I'll come out from this. Like I think I said earlier, one of Reid's problems is, or you said that forward, back, ruck, where's he play, and that's stunted his development. I think so. We're talking about the need to develop a key backman, and Talia or Aaliyah could be that backman. I don't think throwing them into the ruck and playing that mixed role is going to help. So Naismith, Sinclair, Tippett, and Cameron, as you mentioned, there's enough there to work with. I'd rather do that or continue to stunt Reed's growth, which we've already done enough anyway, than ruin a defender. So, no, I don't really like the idea, to be honest.
All right. Now on to the next one. If losing the grand final last year contributed to a psychological shift that we couldn't get back from, that one's from Terry O'Leary on Facebook.
Look, I don't know about you guys, but 2012 seems like such a long time ago. And especially once you get to grand finals and stuff. I mean, as a fan going into last year, I had this niggling feeling that we were just going to lose. And sure enough, that's happened. And with the start we've had to this year, as a fan, it's been pretty rough, bit of a fall from grace from, the past 10 or 20 years of being a Swans fan. I mean, I can't imagine how the players are feeling. So, I mean, surely they must be feeling it and being disappointed in their efforts and their performance as a team. And there have been questions around our effort as well. And that's where one of the few kind of positives I took out of the Hawthorn game was, yes, they out Hawthorned us, which they seem to have been doing pretty well for the past few years, but I don't think you can really fault our effort too much, especially being 2 rotations down. The guys are absolutely knackered at the end of the game, and perhaps it's a kind of a shift in mentality coming into the second half of the year, fingers crossed, but yeah, they've got some psychological demons we need to get through, definitely, yeah.
And Andrew, what do you think?
I mean, we'll never know. I know it during the last half of that grand final, I felt as a fan we weren't allowed to win.
Well, yeah.
So I can only imagine what the players felt. So whether we need to go Wizard of Oz style and get some bravery or whatever I'm getting the story mixed up. I think we need to be braver like the Dogs to win a premiership. But psychologically, no, it has to have an impact. But professional sportsmen, no, I don't know. We'd just be speculating. But if that's true, if they come to that conclusion, then yeah, they need to move some players on and change things up, I guess, don't they? So we'll never know. But I think we can only judge on what we see, and what we see isn't good enough. So whether that's the impact or not, who knows? Just be guessing.
Well, I think maybe the most disappointing thing was, and perhaps surprising at the same time, well, maybe not really, was when Dan Hanbury came out after the third win and said, "Oh, look, we started the season. We basically thought all we had to do was turn up. We kind of drank our own bathwater and, blowing smoke up our own asses. We thought, yeah, that's it. We're going to be premiers, yeah." And then, it could worst start since 1993. Thank you very much. Do you think that sort of arrogance and confidence comes from the fact that they've just had so much success over such a short period of time?
I think maybe the Port Adelaide loss took more out of us than we think, because that's the sort of game. It reminded me a bit of Essendon round 1, 20, whatever Heaney's first year was, 2015?
2014. No, 2015.
Yeah, 20.
We played poor all game, but we were that good that we came back and won it. And the Port game, you sort of before we'd lost 6, 7 in a row or whatever. You start thinking, oh well, eventually they're going to click in and win. It's the game we end up winning, and then they clicked in and ran off with it. So maybe it was, and then the Carlton game similarly. So we're losing those games that we always have played some pretty poor footy, but somehow scraped a win. Buddy's pulled it out of his arse, or Kennedy's lifted, but that's not happening this year. So maybe it's just they did expect to win to a point. They did think they're good. I mean, to be an elite sportsman and perform well, obviously you have to have some level of confidence in your ability, and maybe they got too far ahead of themselves. I don't know, but that's, again, just speculating. But they did play with quite an arrogance about them against Port at the very least. I think they played like a side that expected it was just going to happen, and it didn't. And then they played pretty well against the Dogs round 2. That was actually one of the best games of the year. And then round 3 against Collingwood, that was pretty arrogant as well, and we almost pinched it, but we left it too late again. And then before you know it, you're 0-3, and that's got to have an effect. So maybe it's not the grand final. It's just those early rounds where we didn't get the wins that we normally probably would have started 2-1. You would have pinched a couple of them, and that's when Sydney start to get rolling, but it never happened. So, and here we are now.
All right, on to the last question. Do you think... Actually, hold on, cut. I'll start that one again. I've got to introduce the person as well. All right, guys, last question. This is from Miggs at Big Footy. Do you think Callum Sinclair can become a serviceable ruckman, or are we destined to have a useless second ruckman at best with Teflon hands and a shit haircut?
Love the question. Look, I mean, I've kind of always had in my head that I was never really too sure who won out of the Jetta Sinclair trade. And, you kind of give both players a bit of shit and both teams a bit of shit for that sort of deal. But, I mean, look, Sinclair actually, I say this very grudgingly, hasn't been too awful. He's kind of been pretty serviceable. He doesn't have that kind of forward impact. It's enough that I could kind of confidently say, yeah, leave him forward and bring in Naismith and drop Tippett. But yeah, he's not that shit. That being said, though, my ideal ruck pairing for 2017-2018 would be definitely Naismith and Tippett up forward. So yeah, long story short, he's shit.
I think there's more chance of Miggs getting that threesome that he clearly desires than Sinclair becoming anything other than a shit ruckman. He's got a lot of Make-A-Wish Foundation about him, Sinclair. He tries hard, but he's not really up to it. I agree, he's been serviceable this year, let's put it at that, but ideally you wouldn't play him.
Kind of makes you throw up a bit to say it.
Yeah, but that ability to jump for a mark and make it sail through your hands, it's unique. Let's just leave it at that.
He had a really good first quarter against the Eagles, though. He was by a mile the best one on the ground in that game for the first 25 minutes.
Be nice.
He actually does.
He
Play better when he's the only ruckman, but he's still not that good, so it's not worth taking that risk. But yeah, he likes the responsibility, I think.
And that's it for tonight. Thanks for listening. There'll be another Swans cast next week, including interviews with Andrew Sertori and Stephen Treloar, as well as another roundtable with another guest and a preview of the weekend's match against the Bulldogs. We'll also discuss Mark Robinson's tweet about Alex Vasolo. You can subscribe to the Swans cast through iTunes or stream it directly from the website or the Android app. You can also submit your questions for next week's episode through Twitter or Facebook using the hashtag SwansCast, or by emailing us at swanscast@theswansblog.com. Until next time,